If you've ever gotten frustrated and lost an argument, whether it be professionally in a sales setting or negotiation, or personally with a friend or a spouse or a partner, listen up. I'm going to go over a few of the key ways how someone throws you off, and then I'm going to show you a simple 3-step method in how to combat any of that. So there's about 20 to 30 different ways, knowingly and unknowingly, people can throw you off in a conversation. But I want to talk about the top 3, at least for now. The number 1 that I found in both personal and business settings is the red herring fallacy. What that basically means is you bring up point A. Here today we're discussing point A. That's why I brought the meeting to your attention. I'm calling you about that issue we had last week about this. And within minutes or sometimes later in the conversation, when they start losing or they start feeling a loss of power or you're right and they're wrong, they'll throw up something random, a point B, nothing to do with anything, but your point A now is going to be diluted quickly if you don't think about it. So what'll happen is, here's the valid point. They bring up this point. You go into their world to be a nice guy, which I find myself to be empathetic, and I try to acknowledge their needs, even if they're wrong. You go into their world. Now you step out of your, think about it, a circle of strength. You go into their quicksand, and now you've sank. You realize later, you're like, I didn't get anything accomplished. They've left and nothing got accomplished other than we're now in a worse spot than where we began, and I'm more frustrated. That's the red herring fallacy. That's the number 1 way I think most people, whether it's knowing or unknowingly, they do that. The second one is what I call the overinflator. They take statistics in a bizarro mind of theirs. They'll take statistics and then use the minority statistics there. So for example, you're talking about something and you say, well, in this position, 9 out of 10 times, this is what we found. And then they all of a sudden, they focus on the 1 out of 10 times and they use it to their advantage. Well, this one time, this happened to our company. I'll never forget it. I can't believe it. We bought this one thing from Italy many years ago, or whatever country, and it broke apart and we're never going to buy that again. That's the overinflator. You need to tend to that as well, because they are somewhat valid, because for them, that feeling is real and that did happen one time. But in the law of averages over your life, you can't rely on that 1 out of 10 times. And they don't, but they're using it against you right now. So that's some of the more popular ones. And the third one that I also see is the middle ground person. This one's extremely dangerous. Why? Because naturally, everybody thinks middle ground is good, right? It is. Middle ground is good if you start here, they start here, and you meet exactly at the midpoint. That usually doesn't happen, because especially if you're pitching something and there's a value there, or you're called a meeting for someone because you felt uncomfortable with what they said, they need to correct it with you. And yet they say, well, you know what? Let's meet in the middle. That makes sense if everything was equal, but it's not. So when you're bringing up a point that you feel strongly about and they need to tend to it, they don't, by saying, let's simply just meet in the middle. That's not how things work. So those are the 3 things I want you to think about every time you're in a heated or, more than a conversational discussion, any kind of a debate or an argument. You want to think about that and how you combat that. And most every way someone can come at you, think about A, B, and C. A, you want to acknowledge it, and you want them to acknowledge it. How you do so is you want to be firm but polite, not emotional but empathetic, and you bring it up to them and say, we're speaking about point A, you just brought up point B. I don't see the relevancy right now. Maybe later we can talk about it, but for now, humor me, work with me on the point that I brought you here. You focus on that. That's the A. The B is blow it out of the water. Once you tell them that is no longer relevant, right now, we're not going to talk about it, and we might not even talk about it today. And if it's completely irrelevant, you say, okay, this B is not relevant to our meeting in any way, shape, or form. So let's get back to the matter at hand, which is C, circle. A, you acknowledge. B, you blow it out of water. And then C, circle back to your original point. You might need to do this 2, 3, 4 times. I've done as many as 5 times with some really egregious arguers. But usually what happens is by the 2nd and 3rd time especially, they'll start realizing what they're doing. They have no power left. They realize what's happening, but you're not doing it in a mean way. You're doing it in a cordial, polite way of, let's stick to the facts. This is not what we're talking about. Come back to resolve this. Close that door so we can move on. Remember, A, B, C, for almost any negotiation you're in, personally or professionally. You want to make sure you acknowledge it, make sure they acknowledge it, then you blow it out of the water, close that door and say, it is irrelevant, doesn't make sense to our conversation, it is not pertinent for why we're here today. And then C, you basically circle back to your original point. That 90% of the time will always work. And if it doesn't, one of two things happens. They're going to understand what you're doing and get really upset and maybe not finish the meeting or walk away and storm away. And that's okay. Let the anger dissipate and come back to fight another day, because it's okay to walk away. But if you stick to the ABC, most times you'll realize when you're thoughtfully, proactively working it that way, you'll realize people won't take you off guard and they won't take you into their circle of quicksand, as I call it. So A, B, C. Try that, and I think it'll help you in your next negotiation.